Hey guys, and welcome back to part 3 to What If Naruto was trained by the 9 Fox and became female. If you just want to know if you guys want to know what happened last month, there'll be a link in the description down below which takes you to a playlist where you can watch part 1 and part 2 and any other part that gets added into this series. Now with that out of the way, let's get into this. So, about 2 to 3 months would sort of pass from when Naruto and the Fox had started Naruto on some of the more, well, not just so much seduction, but when he had somewhat introduced Naruto to the variant sex toys he had bought, for her to, a somewhat female self to kind of form, so he could get used to or at least somewhat the kind of sex granted. Yeah, which was somewhat 2 different dildos. One that was pretty much hard glass one, and a somewhat flexible latex one, and also a somewhat bottle lube. Yeah, so the flexible one was pretty much mouth only to get out to you somewhat more comfortable and used to doing somewhat deep throating. That is he was still getting used to that. The glass one was somewhat for both deep throat and hard cock, as it's somewhat so that vaginal sex, which was more than used to now, but had a unique thing that the Fox wasn't all that surprised, and also would be somewhat for anal ass as well, which was what they'd be doing tonight. Or at least from when the Fox had shown them to Naruto, the very next day the Fox had Naruto put the anal butt plug into his ass, and pretty much was forced to wear that all the way up until he came home, pretty much had a bath and went to bed. So even through having to pretty much someone took it out, transformed, put it back in, and then someone went off, got dressed and went off to work, and then come back undressed, took it out, obviously someone for bath, and then bath to bed. And yeah, pretty much so it had allowed Naruto, or at least mainly ass, and Naruto to get kind of used to, well, it's mainly stretch out the arse, so it could actually take a bigger object in than pretty much small objects out. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, though the Fox was more than annoyed, as he'd been waiting there for, he'd been kind of sitting there for about 10 minutes now on this so far, as Naruto had been, or at least the vaginal one was already done, and that from night hack, so was the kind of deep throating, which now it was mainly Naruto getting used to kind of just being able to have go in and out, that he could deep throat it, but not kind of be able to deep throat, or at least deep throated like someone was using that as pretty much a vagina. And yeah, pretty much couldn't breathe when it was pulled out, and when it was pushed back in, was still either trying to breathe in, couldn't breathe in, or at least wasn't breathing in fast enough just yet. And yeah, so yeah, anyway, yeah, those two were done fine after when the Fox told him that he'd be or at least to pull out the anal plug. It pretty much told Naruto that should be, or at least possibly having the glass dildo up at last, which the Fox had proceeded to confirm, and she'd been pretty much standing over it for 10 minutes now, and while the Fox had reached his limit of patience, as he'd warned Naruto that if that wasn't in her in the next few seconds, he was just going to do something about it, which he'd go up and would lower down slightly more, but would once more stop with the tip just somewhat just barely touching somewhat the butt. When somewhat the fox would just somewhat sigh and would somewhat get up and with somewhat a few somewhat words to somewhat Naruto, well, he's somewhat after seemingly a small bit of talk back and forward, Naruto was all but pretty much somewhat seduced somewhat from the fox, which fox had to really somewhat try somewhat to somewhat seduce Naruto, but still could, though it was really hard to. And yeah, though somewhat, and after somewhat getting all his Naruto somewhat pleasure up a bit more, up until the point of where it would be just somewhat casually, or at least somewhat just, casually producing somewhat a waterfall of fluid down below, and somewhat swipe someone with somewhat within can, would even somewhat tease with us, or with somewhat laying his hand, go all the way up to slightly somewhat the occasional brush against somewhat a vagina, which did somewhat less a somewhat slight moan every so often. Though the main reason why was to somewhat do some to somewhat so the dildo would have some lubrication, somewhat lube on it. And so once that was done and the glass dildo was fairly somewhat lubed up, it would somewhat then proceed to plonk Naruto onto the somewhat floor, to which somewhat Naruto would allow a slight somewhat grunt, though with somewhat all the pleasure. It somewhat didn't really bring somewhat Naruto kind of out of the somewhat pleasure-filled, or at least the somewhat Naruto out of the pleasure-filled haze that his conscious was in. Pretty much the subconscious was all practically somewhat in control and was more than happy to have somewhat it rough, and and somewhat Naruto and the fox would simply say that he was going to do it now, to which Naruto would go, "Oh, you could be as rough though." So it'd go, so you can be as rough, somewhat gasp, somewhat out loud, and somewhat eyes would kind of go from somewhat half-lidded, somewhat pleasure-filled to straight up wide and pain-filled, as fox would perceive to have the somewhat glass somewhat dildo and just shove it down somewhat Naruto's arse, which had of course somewhat shrunk with the butt plug being out for 10 minutes or so. It had shrunk, so having it somewhat forcefully then somewhat, or at least rapidly widened, as well as being somewhat slammed down, more somewhat did indeed produce somewhat pain, and the fox didn't care, because that was Naruto's own fault. He had 10 minutes to get his ass somewhat down and slowly slowly get used to it, but so Naruto goes, so I did what did you do? I shoved it in you. What? You actually put your, no, damn it, the somewhat glass dildo I told you to fucking put into your ass, but you didn't have to. I gave you 10 minutes, Naruto, for you to slowly go down at your own pace and put it in. But no buts. I could have been there another fucking half an hour, to all that I know, until you'd finally somewhat gone down. So I took you into my own fucking hands. If you're going to somewhat be like this every time now that this comes along, I am going to continue to shove it in your fucking ass until you start doing it yourself. Got it? Hi. Now sit on the damn floor for at least half an hour. And afterwards someone go up and would sort of roll over, sort of onto his back, and sort of sit up, sort of crossing his legs, with one arm somewhat going kind of unconsciously down and another somewhat across breasts. And half an hour later, the fox would somewhat tell Naruto to just get up. yeah, something Naruto would and been something forward to, and something and though just his arm was just somewhat the arm was about to, go to the end and grab it to somewhat pull it out, the fox would sort of grab it and proceed to just yank it out, which would cause somewhat a bit more pain, and Naruto would sort of groan in sort of pain and would go he didn't have to. I shoved it in hard. So I shoved it in. I'm going to yank it out. When you finally go down on that, when you finally take it in yourself, then you can take it out by yourself. Got it? Hi. Good. And so from there, or at least 2 days, or at least a day would go by. So the next day, that's at night, because they wouldn't do it mainly with fox given or at least knowing that he'd been definitely a bit more on the sort of rough side, and then the day after, I'd done it with Naruto definitely hesitant and taken 5 minutes, though the fox was very much going to just go up and shove it into us again, though she did this time indeed go down and very much take it in, and also somewhat fearing that the fox would also shove the somewhat glass dildo down her throat, though had somewhat I tried and practically almost somewhat and also somewhat caused herself to choke a couple of times on the doing the blowjob rubber dildo, which the fox had perceived to reprimand Naruto, though then again though it pointed out these done 2 nights ago, to which the fox had pointed out why he was annoyed, and that he wouldn't have done with mouth as that could also lead to either broken teeth or potential it's going down well too far and either causing internal throat damage or even voice box damage. So yeah, he wasn't going to, but he did something say that if she did start to annoy him about that part, then he would just probably more than likely use his own dick. And anyway, as I said, time would pass, and Naruto would be a Genin now. Yes, it would be the day after the Genin exams. So Naruto passed. Well, for one, Naruto had the Shadow Jutsu, so Naruto would pass. Also, reviews that which Iruka could also know, and through the past year or two, Iruka had somewhat been or at least doing his best to try and help Naruto get the clone jutsu down, mainly as it would be useful for Naruto, as Naruto could mix the clone jutsu and shadow clone jutsu together, so enemy and that wouldn't actually know which one was a fate, which one was an illusion and which one was a shadow clone or the real Naruto. And but of course there was very little gained pretty much doing something like that. Anyway, though somewhat of course also somewhat with that also meant that night was also or this day, though more so night was also the last night Naruto would ever somewhat go to the nightclub, the casino that had been she'd been or at least going to working as a bunny girl, as the employer, the owner of the casino had agreed that she'd leave on that date, and she indeed did, with once her shift was up, and some of these girls that she'd kind of, gotten to somewhat know had started to somewhat go out and, she'd somewhat come home practically, borderline drunk. She'd barely, somewhat borderline drunk. And though her eyes would Nat would sort of wake up and would somewhat like have sighing comfort as something was just coming with the ball and was and somewhat just felt nice, warm, cuddly and fluffy way. I don't know anything fluffy nor warm nor comfy. It's definitely not my arm. So our eyes would sort of flutter open to somewhat just somewhat blink and go sort of very slightly sort of raised and groggy sort of feminine voice, as suddenly sort of the fox would go, you're awake. And would go, what, but shouldn't you? I'm a shadow clone. Okay. In other words, bosses, something inside you sort of came out for some odd reason last night. You were crying, so after your bath, you'd formed him. He then started to cry, so he created a shadow clone, me, and then dispelled himself. And though I don't know why I was crying. Sorry. Though sort of nod, and though from there, after it's trying to get or at least though the shadow clone would perceive to disappear, as though its last words were don't forget to kind of get dressed this morning, and being momentarily confused when it would go, whoa, right. I ninja now, and I have to go to the top of the Hokage town and have my pictures taken right. And get up and go over, the bathroom, and eventually on the toilet, the fox had woken up. Simply, and had simply just stated Naruto. So it's the Naruto responded to Kurama. And so that was the only things that the fox said, as the fox would, or at least the fox had something kind of rough, maybe potential idea why you should potentially create him, because there was no real reason to for him to have been formed besides from maybe someone to talk or that. Maybe that's what Naruto was originally was going for, but due to being practically somewhat drunk, and Naruto already being somewhat, and of course when you're somewhat drunk, you tend to be kind of a bit odd. Naruto's unpredictability and these potential somewhat oddness of what or at least being drunk, or at least near drunkenness / practically drunk. So it could be was a just meant Naruto was going to talk, potentially forgot and cried, and it was either that or she was going to ask him something, forgot what it was, cried, and then proceeded to do exactly that, or at least unconsciously do it, as well. Somewhat when Naruto was about, when her and the fox, he and the fox first met when Naruto was about a year and 1 month old, around about that, up until Naruto was about 3 prior, or at least about the same night / a day after Naruto had stopped somewhat going into his mindscape, and every night up till that point Naruto would go into his mindscape with the fox when it was night, when he was like in bed, tucked up to go to sleep. When he's in bed to go to sleep. He'd go up to the fox and would cuddle and cuddle up to a specific, one of his tails, and it wasn't a random, tail. It was a specific tail every night, the same tail every night, and of course, just being that young and that, I had no conscious memory, of that, but subconsciously did, and so had somewhat. So it was assumed potentially why that, consciously now I had no idea why then someone cried, why someone subconsciously knew, to create that, as obviously being, in this pretty much drunk status for the first time, also going to sleep wanting to feel safe in that, and so of course that safeness, or at least the safeness that he'd gotten back when he was when he was around the fox, and pretty much using a specific a specific tail of the fox to cuddle onto, and someone had cuddled that, as the fox had made, or at least would made made a sound clone of himself, but someone had altered it so it'd have its ears and tails, and Naruto had proceeded, or at least after somewhat kind of calming down, and the shadow clone of the fox or at least took Naruto to bed. And after pretty much taking over, or at least, pretty much taking her in, and that had proceeded to cuddle the exact same tail she did all those years ago, when she was about pretty much 1, 2 to 3 years old. And anyway, though of course this day, once she'd after she'd come out, from the toilet, she'd would release the transformation, remembering to do so, and would proceed to get dressed, as she wouldn't no longer require the butt plug, mainly due to the fact that the oil had been taken in, doing the actual dildo thing, so that, and pretty much been doing it nearly every night now, so there was almost no point, requiring butt plug. Granted, Fox had stated that he still or at least he still very much could if he wanted to, but very much didn't. And anyway, sorry, dogs being a pain in the ass, guys. Anyway, Naruto. Naruto would get dressed, and what would he get dressed in? Well, his academy uniform is simply dead last. He'd appear as this, dead last self, as well. Why not? Anyone that would see, his picture would think, hey, the dead last, or he's not a true shinobi, or that. Whereas he was in somewhat new Naruto and Sasuke were definitely friends and definitely trained, but he didn't really know Naruto's skills and that, though he presumed Naruto was very much a lot better than what the academy stated. Naruto was definitely a lot freaking smarter than what the academy, stated, as the academy pretty much labelled him as the dead last. We practically just barely passed it. He was the true dead last of the class, even though he knew that Naruto was probably on the very opposite end and was probably the actual smartest and strongest and fastest of the class. Essentially, if using chakra to boost his strength, strength and speed and that. Anyway, though Naruto, So it's like that they would pretty much go relatively same size from no face paint or that what he did in canon. His prank would relatively good, same sort on the Father Kage, that being transformed into his sexy jutsu, though his sexy jutsu wouldn't be naked. Due to him being, more than comfortable somewhat in his female kind of form, his sexy jutsu had kind of gone over a slight sort of kind of change. That sort of being that he'd pretty much made his sexy jutsu form just where pretty much somewhat a kind of sexy form, somewhat pretty much sexual that or at least somewhat altered it to also wear a sort of bunny outfit. So it's like a somewhat sexy bunny outfit. And yeah, that decided of course kind of work on Hiruzen, and so from there, Konohamaru thing would happen, and Naruto would end up, or at least deciding, as a somewhat way to get, back at Hiruzen for, still not telling him about, Naruto's story, about the fox, obviously, freaking knew. But of course, Hiruzen didn't know that. In fact, Hiruzen was still keeping it pretty much secret to him, or at least not, going, oh yeah, Naruto, you just, you have Naruto inside of you, and that, which, who's now pretty much should be, told, or heck, he should have been told once he started using, chakra. Academy timeline, as somewhat, he could have, drawn upon the fox's chakra instead of his own. Yeah, but it seems like the Third didn't care, or that, and anyway, so Naruto pretty much had another reason to teach Konohamaru the sexy jutsu. And pretty much it mainly taught Konohamaru the sexy jutsu so that he could teach, as in a way to teach Konohamaru the transformation jutsu. And so that they would pretty much go the same up until about the more so evening time when he and Sasuke would meet, as they would talk pretty much that they would guaranteed be on the same team. That and he would ask if Naruto would actually wear Shinobi his actual kind of Shinobi outfit tomorrow too, which Naruto shake his head stating that was very point, as it would probably just be getting to know the same team and also a sensei. To which he'd nod, and he'd go then the day after when the gaining the actual proper gaining test would somewhat be done. Team test would be done. No, as somewhat as if they fail, it's it's no point in showing them about sensei everything I can do. After all, at least I want myself, at least want to keep myself, my true abilities with myself hidden for, right now. But if she passes us, then the day after, something I realised would be an official team and all. So it's just go nod. And they talk a bit more before somewhat, going their separate ways. And the very next day, Naruto's once more singly in his, academy somewhat uniform. Well, academy somewhat shinobi kind of uniform. The sort of reactions were the teams were all the exact same, with somewhat body somewhat Naruto and kind of Sasuke somewhat reaction to being on the same team as one another. That and somewhat and also the team number, as they were more actually surprised on the team number than they were somewhat on the same team, as they would both be somewhat generally happy that they were on the same team, as they were practically brothers at this point. And the fact they were placed in team 7, which they Naruto, or both Naruto and Sasuke had gone to the library to sort of look up the teams and that, and how teams were potentially somewhat made, so that Naruto knew where he could be in class, sort of performance wise, to be on the same team. And with Sasuke being the the overall male shinobi of the year, and so I didn't make that Naruto would have to come in as the actual dead last, which he did with relative ease. Yeah. Though they'd sort of find out that could spot all these, that team was, Team 7, and that Team 7 had a freaking near pretty much legendary record with the first ever Team 7 being the sort of third Hokage, and that with the first Team 7 also being led by the second Hokage, Tobarama, and potentially temporary, I'd also say, and a potentially also with the first as well as and then the second generation was known as the legendary Sannin, with the third Hokage being the sensei, through the second Shinobi, doing the in between, it'd have to be in between the First and Second World War, Shinobi World War, wouldn't it? As they took part in the Second and Third Shinobi World War. And as Hiruzen became Hokage during the First Shinobi World War. So and then drive the Sannin, then had his team with Minato becoming, with or at least Dry's team not becoming all that famous, besides from one student, that being who he would end up teaching, taken on as a apprentice, and with that person becoming the Yellow Frost of the Hidden Leaf and the Hokage, and then his own team during the Third Shinobi World War, spawning Hatake Kakashi of the copy. Hatake Kakashi, the copycat ninja of 1,000 jutsu, or the Shinobi of 1,000, the Shinobi of 1,000 jutsu, copycat Kakashi, and that, and of course during the Third Shinobi World War, of course it would also state that both both members of Team 7, Minato, would died. One sacrificing simply herself, with another. One pretty much kind of sacrificing his own life to save Kakashi's, pushing him away from the cave collapse, and then similarly being killed, though it would state the truth that she'd pretty much had sacrificed her life using her teammate's own jutsu to kill her, pretty much to kill her, so that she wouldn't release the three tails that was sealed with inside of her. And so being on Team 7 and knowing that or at least that Team 7 was always taught by one of the previous members of the previous Team 7, meant that the only person would be Hatake Kakashi, and he was stated to be, near, borderline, borderline Armbu? What am I on about? Borderline S rank when he was in Armbu. So, if it was true that Sensei would indeed be Hatake Kakashi, damn, were they kid up to become a freaking, legendary team if it wasn't for that third teammate member being Hano Sakura, and whilst grades stated that she'd be, she was the Kunoichi of the year, both pretty much knew that all the Konoichi, probably minus Hinata, were pretty much the true dead lasts of the year, with the only thing keeping them up from being dead last being Naruto, Shikamaru, and Kiba, pretty much. And yeah, though, mainly sort of Kiba not all that good. Shikamaru too lazy, and Naruto tactically being the dead last for, team placement, to manipulate the team placements. So yeah. And though from there, of course, they would end up having to wait 3 freaking hours for Kakashi to arrive, and their first interactions would again pretty much go relatively the same, with Naruto keeping up the facade of a somewhat kind of knuckle-headed, somewhat stupid, idiotic, somewhat kind of shinobi who wants to become somewhat Hokage, and Sasuke would somewhat keep up his bravado of simply wanting revenge on his brother, though he did want to see his brother again. That part was true, as revenge would require the requirement of seeing said person being in the presence of said person, but the killing part of the revenge wasn't, as he wanted to meet up with his brother when he was strong, very much hopefully S rank, so that he could understand why his brother wiped out his clan and left him alive. As there had to have been reason to sort of why his brother wiped them out afterward. And that, and if Naruto could still somewhat be and if Naruto could still tolerate the entire village with them calling him demon and that, and though granted they less called him that now and more just kind of somewhat ignored his presence as it was clear to them that it kind of wasn't working, so they started around about the time he was 10 to 11 years old. So anyway, and so the next, of course, day, or at least though when Kakashi revealed the fact that about what is it, like 33% of that the failure rate was like 66% or something like that, so only 3 teams would pass, potentially 3 to 2 teams would only pass. Naruto and Sasuke would sort of fake it, and Kakashi would notice that Sasuke maybe or at least Kakashi would get the feeling that Sasuke may potentially know, while from Naruto he couldn't even tell if Naruto was lying. And though it also stated in Naruto's or at least thing that he was a bad guy in that, though his and also then told him after Kakashi had read it to completely ignore that, as it was wildly incorrect, though that seemed to be relatively living up to what it stated about Naruto, so he was kind of confused, how could it be wrong? And he would only find out tomorrow, and that very day would indeed come, with them once more waiting 3 hours, though one thing Naruto did do was, he wasn't going to wasn't going to have someone to not have breakfast. So in others, he ate breakfast, and pretty much when they'd dispelled, they or at least once Kakashi left, they pretty much seemingly broke up, 3, or at least 2 people that didn't like one another did. And though after some distance away and after making sure nobody was following them, plus somewhat potentially their sensei, they would then or at least Sasuke and Naruto would regroup and would go to training ground 7 to scout out the training ground, as it was always good to know the battlefield and that, and the condition of it. And anyway, after that, and also making up a kind of plan, and that and also Naruto somewhat telling Sasuke to obviously not skip breakfast, as if he came 3 hours late, he's probably going to come 3 hours late again. So, yeah. And of course, I'd agree, and yeah, they would somewhat make the statue remark that he wasn't, that stupid. Just Naruto is just somewhat roll his eyes and go, yeah, whatever. And, well, yeah, pretty much just plunking something fight out one another up until they would simply somewhat be, or at least somewhat just kind of Sasuke, somewhat kind of wonder about, somewhat about, checking the trees and that. Or at least just the, ground to see if there was any potential, traps or that, old traps or that. So I did somewhat hear a very much feminine voice when he somewhat knew. He'd somewhat turn around and he'd just somewhat immediately go up as well. Somewhat yesterday when, they'd, somewhat mad. Well, or at least the day before that. So when, somewhat when they had their photo taken for their and that, and finished up the paperwork for them to somewhat be shinobi or that, whatever. When they'd somewhat talked about the plan, that when Sasuke asked Naruto if he'd be in his actual shinobi gear, which he obviously wasn't. Somewhat Sasuke or at least somewhat stated that, or at least Naruto seemingly somewhat favoured, somewhat seemingly somewhat being and all that, to which Naruto would someone point out like pretty much have to be due to the fact that like they're someone teammate, none of the girls, and they can be that they could, that they would potentially be teamed up with someone who wasn't going to transform themselves someone themselves into a sort of someone very beautiful someone older woman to do seduction, so he pretty much had to. Yes, Sasuke simply somewhat snorted, and Naruto pretty much kind of went, or at least somewhat kind of glinted, as he'd state that he could always, somewhat seduce Sasuke, to which he'd somewhat snort, and he'd state that it was just somewhat unlikely, somewhat provoking Naruto, and yeah, only when Naruto had pretty much, only when he'd truly somewhat seen that glint in his, somewhat, or at least somewhat in his eyes, did he know that Naruto was probably going to potentially do it. Pretty much, so he'd practically stepped on a sort of landmine, and he'd been slightly somewhat on guard, and yeah, though it wouldn't somewhat be too long until somewhat, yeah, though pretty much somewhat Naruto had of course gone a lot better in both sort of seduction and also of course somewhat with Fox's help, as Fox was teaching Naruto how to seduce some people that, and also Naruto was also decently good at resisting seduction. Pretty much any normal somewhat male that would try and seduce her would be impossible. Heck, the Fox pretty much could only seduce Naruto up until somewhat a point now. That was Naruto would be better, wouldn't really be so much seduced. It would somewhat work potentially if Naruto wasn't paying too much attention, or had definitely gotten somewhat tipsy. Then it would still somewhat work if Naruto was female and Fox was male. But otherwise, still somewhat with the Fox being, or at least transforming himself into female, and Naruto somewhat into his normal self, Fox could still somewhat seduce him with a lot more challenge, somewhat which would somewhat still take a lot more, still be somewhat was a lot harder, but it could still seduce him. For now though, the Fox presumed that they'd still probably be able to seduce him up until the point Naruto truly hit and started puberty, when someone the Fox would find it potentially something really hard to sort of seduce Naruto, and by that point Naruto should be pretty much immune to potential all types of seduction. And yeah, hopefully. Anyway, and yeah, though, and somewhat and within 5 seconds, Sasuke would pretty much be putting it out of somewhat hands, and Sasuke would indeed be somewhat seduced, though I don't think Naruto would somewhat do would, or he's simply somewhat just, somewhat giggle and whack simply Sasuke somewhat hard, decently hard over the head to pretty much send him into the ground, to which Sasuke would somewhat groan, somewhat rubbing his head and would somewhat glare up, to which Naruto would just somewhat smile and somewhat crossed his somewhat arms over his simply somewhat chest and go, well, thought you wouldn't be seduced by me, huh? Thought I couldn't seduce you, and Sasuke would somewhat just glare up with some definitely embarrassment and very much red cheeks, and he'd simply say, don't you dare tell anyone, and Naruto would somewhat shrug and go, who'd believe me anyway? And he'd somewhat open his mouth, though he'd somewhat shut it. That was a kind of somewhat sad truth. Who would believe him? Well, Chuchi, Ayame would state. Heck, maybe even somewhat Hokage-sama may believe you. Yeah, that's good. I don't think somewhat the old man will, but Chuchi and Ayame may very much believe me. And he'd go, oh, I'm gonna tell, no, don't you dare, as Naruto would somewhat start walking off. But yeah, with some smoke coming somewhat, or at least off of, somewhat her as she'd revert back. So, we'd release the transformation, and yeah, and somewhat it'd cause Sasuke to somewhat trip over, or at least get up and somewhat initially trip over his feet, and somewhat run after, pretty much tackling Naruto somewhat to the ground, and somewhat initializing a pretty much spar. And yeah. Anyway, I said, they were practically like brothers, so they would, poke fun at one another, and yeah. Anyway, anyway, though, back to somewhat present, Naruto and, Naruto, Sasuke, and Sakura and someone be there, waiting, with, all three tying up when they were in cannon, and, yeah, somewhat time would pass when Kakashi would finally, arrive 3 hours, of course, late, with Sakura somewhat glaring at him, with somewhat both kind of Naruto and Sakura seeming, or at least Sakura, glaring at him, somewhat yelling at him that he was late. Though he'd simply somewhat ignore her and would proceed to, tell them what he somewhat would in canon. And yeah, from there, of course, when you tell them to somewhat start. But yeah, pretty much that, part would be like canon up until the point where you tell them to start, to which there'd be, a cloud of smoke, and the only one gone would be Sakura. Yep, Naruto and Sasuke would still be there, and yeah, Kakashi would somewhat quack an eyebrow. Well, that was interesting. Yeah, they would simply somewhat, they wouldn't even nod at one another, they would just charge at somewhat Kakashi. They already knew the somewhat plan. And yeah, Naruto would somewhat head in first, to which Kakashi would somewhat block, and would somewhat push Naruto back. And as Naruto would somewhat be pushed back, Sasuke would, charge in. And yeah, and it started to somewhat happen more and more. Kakashi would realise, or at least would quickly realise that they were actually working as a team, well, as a duo, and were timed. As well, this wasn't, he wasn't, pushing Naruto somewhat back, and Sasuke, was, getting fitting back. Heck, both of them would get that fitting back, obviously very quickly, but continue to slightly go back to allow the other one to go in, so they wouldn't, kind of interfere with one another's punch or kick, or potentially, backflip due to a kick or a hit from Kakashi that they were dodging. And yeah, they were truly working together, synchronized, which that according to their files was impossible. They hated one another, which pretty much mean that Hiruzen was right, that Hokage was right, and to ignore both Sasuke and Naruto's somewhat thing. More so, it stated more so Naruto's, as Naruto's one was practically incorrect. With somewhat Naruto practically simply somewhat manipulating that to be on Sasuke's team and that. And yeah, though Hiruzen did, or at least would somewhat tell Kakashi that he would have given or at least him Naruto and Sasuke anyway, even if Naruto was higher up in the class rankings, mainly is he'd had the Sharingan, so he could potentially manipulate the potentially Fox cast out into Genjutsu to potentially and yeah. And obviously, having Sharingan, Sasuke had potential to reawaken his Sharingan, or something only as something Hiruzen Kakashi, and that's something new as awaken. So his Sharingan, and yeah, and Sasuke still didn't have his Sharingan awakened yet. He still hadn't reawoken it yet. So yeah. Anyway, from something that would continue, and Kakashi would start to kind of push them more and more and more. Sakura would just sit there dumbfoundedly watching the bushes as she'd watch her crush and the dead last work as a team together. What was going on? Was this a Genjutsu by Kakashi Sensei? It couldn't be. She tried multiple times releasing it. She even bit her tongue. Well, she even, or at least someone pinched herself. She wasn't going to do really bodily harm to herself. Now that wasn't her. Don't be stupid. Yeah. Anyway, though, yeah, she'd somewhat watch, maybe somewhat. Though she'd somewhat get into her head that Naruto, or at least Sasuke, not Sasuke. Sasuke had convinced Naruto to somewhat work either with him or that. Something about it, either that or yeah. Or Naruto knew that, they were, something others to put, Sasuke on a pedestal. And yeah, which of course we know is far from the very truth. And yeah, somewhat Kakashi would recognise that they were now at somewhat Chunin level, and were somewhat at high Chunin, starting to enter borderline low Jonin. And so he'd noticed that Sasuke would become less active in the actual kind of somewhat switch and somewhat out, as somewhat realised that it seemed like Sasuke knew variants that Naruto could obviously go faster. And yeah, besides or at least Naruto doing weight training, which Sasuke didn't really, or at least so much Sasuke did do, but not to he didn't have Naruto's healing factor in that, so he couldn't really necessarily push himself or wear the exact same amount of weight Naruto could. That, and Naruto also knew more about how to amplify his how his own chakra interacted with his muscles, so he could get more out of his chakra, so he could hit harder, run faster, somewhat with the equivalent amount of chakra that Sasuke would put into his muscles. And yeah, pretty much he was more efficient in somewhat doing so. And yeah, anyway, but yeah, so yeah, and yeah, though from there they would seemingly disappear. And from there, or at least seemingly somewhat just as somewhat Kakashi's somewhat thinking about, should I? No, I shouldn't, but he'd somewhat think about it, though he'd mentally somewhat shake his head, as he'd all of a sudden find himself opponentless, as both Naruto and Sasuke would vanish in a puff of smoke. And yeah, he'd momentarily think about, maybe it's just Naruto and then it's just two chakrams, but no. It couldn't, be it, but others they would have dispelled, almost immediately. Well, these seconds, he'd got a hit or so on them, so yeah, it definitely wasn't a shadow clone. Yeah. Just smoke bomb then, and yeah, he'd sigh as, yeah, and yeah. Though from there, after a couple of seconds, he'd go and put Sakura under some genjutsu. And yeah, pretty much just to see, what she could do, and like the kind of president that she'd be able to spot genjutsu and that, and yeah, you should move that much. No, they hyped her up to be to wound up her being absolutely shit, and that's how she would still very much be. And yeah. Though from there, Naruto and Sasuke would go over, knowing that they would have to work as a team, and that even if they didn't get the battles, at least working as a trio would guarantee that they get the battles. How so? Well, Sakura would either use their genjutsu or that, or would try to, and would just occasionally throw kunai and kunai shuriken when he and Naruto got made an opening for her on Kakashi to do so. And yeah, Princess Star wasn't much else Sakura could do. She was shit at hand-to-hand combat. And yeah, so there really wasn't much she could do. And so from there, after Sasuke kind of, or at least breaking up to it, she'd kind of momentarily freak out, to which Naruto somewhat kind of in a slightly kind of, or at least serious voice would just kind of say her name, which would immediately stop her and kind of almost freeze her cold, almost knee cold, just in slightly sharpness, to which Sasuke would say and would tell her that they'd have to work together, and that if they didn't, none of them would pass, and they'd all end up going back to the academy, and that. And yeah, she'd nod and she'd ask Sasuke, what she'd have to do, to which Sasuke would state that he and Naruto came up with a plan to and that somewhat when they made an opening for her to use somewhat Shokin, Kunai Shokin, and that when possible to put Kakashi under a genjutsu. She'd point out that she'd just nod, and yeah, both Naruto and Sasuke were somewhat slightly hoping that she'd point out the fact that it would be stupid to try and put a Jonin under a genjutsu, but no. Nope. Not a single word. She'd just nod and she'd state that she was ready. They'd nod, and after a few seconds more, Naruto and Sasuke would once more charge out. And yeah. And from there, they would start fighting once more. Though he would somewhat notice or at least Chakra trying to suddenly interfere with his own, in other words, genjutsu, and yeah, he'd of course easily dismiss it, and he'd feel it come a couple of times until a point where he'd then finally, or at least Sakura would seemingly finally make her presence actually, known mainly, actually become visible, even though he didn't need to know where she was, or at least see where she was. Same with Naruto, and yeah, mainly. Yeah, so Kakashi was a trained Sensen Nin, while Naruto was a natural Sensen Nin who trained his ability when Kurama made him aware. And yeah. Anyway, from there they would continue to somewhat push Kakashi, as Kakashi would slowly somewhat push up until the point where he was he's really heavily thinking about using the Sharingan, as Naruto was very much, Naruto was keeping up with him, and he didn't have much more to give besides using Chakra to really start, amplifying his strength and his speed and that. But even then, Nato's punches and that were coming at such, randomness and that he was really thinking of using the Sharingan to really help him out. Heck, and at that point you then sort of realised that he had been using Chakra, well, not to enhance his strength, but to enhance his speed. Which was kind of why he then sort of realised that, it was why he was even more so considering, using Sharingan, to which he'd realised that he really had gotten rusted if, again he could do this much. So to him, he really had sunken from the borderline S-rank shinobi that he once was in Armbu. He really had fallen far. And though thankfully he would be saved by the bell from making the decision, as the bell would go off, and from there they would go over to the stumps, and Kakashi would proceed to somewhat, tell them that, or at least they failed, to which both Naruto and Sasuke would point out that, it was a teamwork exercise and that, and though after somewhat a load and damage, after a load of something back and forward, Kakashi would end up somewhat, very much like that, and all he's revealing that both Sasuke and Naruto very much knew that, the something was indeed teamwork, and that Konoha always, valued teamwork over, anything and that, and that, of course, Kakashi would end up, staying his own, something that, those who abandon their sort of teammates are scum, though those who abandon the missions are scum, though those who abandon their teammates and friends, comrades, are worse than scum, to which Naruto and Sasuke would sort of agree, and as they, and from that, Kakashi would then tell them to meet him at the the Hokage's office tomorrow, to, or at least, someone outside of it, to get their first mission, to which somewhat Sasuke, or at least Naruto and Sasuke would kind of ask why and that shouldn't they be trained for their first, mission, to which Kakashi would, I assure you don't need any trains to do this mission. They would and Sasuke would kind of look at one another. Those they nod, and from there Kakashi dismissed them, to which Sasuke would Sakura would proceed to ask Sasuke about, going on a date with her, to which Sasuke would turn around and wouldn't just tell her no, but would also point out her flaws and that, and would tell her that no matter what, he won't date her, and that he was a shinobi, and that is and the last thing on his freaking minds are gals, and that maybe once he was 18, 20 years old, will he think about starting a family and, wanting someone. For right now, he's got his damn career to focus on, so no, Sakura, I don't want to go on a date with you, and probably never will I, especially if you never freaking, and pretty much he'd, swear a bit, and we'd somewhat pretty much emphasise that, besides from by truly being the weakest on team, that if she really didn't start truly training and acting like a true Konrichi, as she would never make it, she'd be killed, if not get, us killed. And Kakashi someone would listen, and though, and he was potentially thinking about going in, but he also could see, that it would, he could tell Sakura that in a nice way, and it probably wouldn't really affect all that much. Hearing it from the very person she has a crush on was definitely hitting her a lot harder, and she'd kind of look over to someone, Naruto, and would kind of ask, surprisingly, if he kind of saw if she'd kind of agreed with Sasuke, to which Naruto would sigh and go, well, pretty much. I'd have said it a lot differently, but yes, Sakura. And yeah, tears would somewhat come to her eyes, and yeah. And yeah, though Kakashi would somewhat, or at least would somewhat remind them that, or at least, yeah, there's no damage. Well, no, Kakashi wouldn't even sort of say nothing, and they would, Sasuke and Naruto would somewhat leave, and even Kakashi would, as he'd have to go and tell the, Hiruzen and that, Hiruzen the third Hokage, that, his team passed. And yeah, though once everyone was gone, Sakura would sort of look up with a somewhat burning, suddenly in her eyes, saying that she would, truly start, maybe training. If that was the way to get into Sasuke's heart, then she would train, she would truly become, a Konoichi, and show that, she was truly worthy. And yeah. And yeah. Anyway, once, Kakashi, someone would arrive, someone would kind of, Kakashi would go, yo, and someone would go, you're late. To which Kakashi would someone just shrug, as he'd seemingly be reading his book. Though Hiruzen would go, now that you're here, as Kakashi would come to the front, let's get this started with, as, teams 1 through 6 would say whatever they did. We never know what they did. Some may pass, some of them probably say that they passed or failed. Don't know. But yeah, those would, what's his name? No, Kunai would sort of, go first, and that's who's, the team 8 would pass. That's why then, state that his team 10 would pass, and Kakashi would then, casually state that team 7 passed as well. To which Hiruzen would somewhat smile, as it seemed like Kakashi did, or at least that they, either worked as a team or that. They presumed, somewhat Sasuke and Naruto would, and passed. Yeah, though the others would somewhat be surprised, and they would, say, it must have been the truth, to which, Kakashi perceived to somewhat tell them to just all shut up, and that it wasn't actually Sasuke that was the real reason why the team actually passed. To which there would be some gasp and wide eyes that it wasn't there, Uchiha and that, and yeah. Though the only ones that obviously, didn't think that were, Kunai slightly thought that of the something Uchiha. Asuma, knowing, or at least from his dad, that was more to very much Naruto that met the eye. Obviously more so believed his dad, so when Kakashi stated that, he was somewhat think that, probably both of them, if not more so Naruto, but probably both of them together, and he'd state that, so in fact it was mainly Naruto that the team passed. And he'd look after Hokage, and he'd state, even though Hokage-sama, you have also underestimated Naruto. Well, I guess that, but by how much? By a lot, Hokage-sama. By a lot. And yeah, Hiruzen would just kind of go somewhat wide-eyed himself, he'd put Naruto at least borderline borderline low tuning to low tuning, borderline, so low, about low to mid tuning. If Kakashi was saying that, then it would mean that Naruto was high tuning to low jonin, if not low to mid jonin. Was he? Yeah. And well, yeah. Though from that, Hiruzen would dismiss them with only Kurunai and Asuma staying behind. Plus Kakashi's, as he'd somewhat asked Kakashi what his team's performance was like, to which Kakashi would state that initially or at least after, arriving, yeah, that is, once this, it started, that, how Sakura went into hiding, but Naruto and Sasuke didn't, that how they proceeded to work straight off the bat as a team, pretty much thrown away, the fact that, they were so-called, seemingly, hated each other. They clearly didn't. They were working perfectly in time as a team, so, yeah, it was clear that they, that was, a front, a fake, and that they were very much friends, to which people go, I'm pretty sure, didn't I tell you that? Kakashi would think and go, I don't think so, Hokage-sama. And yeah, though then again, Kakashi could have, someone himself could have, missed it, so yeah, it wasn't, it was slightly accusatory, but not much, in that as, yeah, he could indeed, didn't hear him. Anyway, and then, it proceeds to someone to explain, well, they seem to find this, that Sakura was pretty much the true dead last of the academy, or either of the academy or the Konoichi sort of, whereas all of the fangirls of Summer Sasuke were definitely probably dead last, as Sakura is no Konoichi of the year. As you proceed to casually fall for a genjutsu, and a relatively easy one at that, before Kunai could open her mouth about genjutsu and that, and yeah, to which is somewhat not saying that, well, I guess we're gonna have to somewhat update the academy curriculum to make sure that, none of this kind of happens again. Especially with Naruto manipulating the rankings to kind of get some manipulating the teams, so that he'd get teamed with Sasuke. Kakashi would blink and he'd go, so he truly were serious about that, Hokage-sama, and he'd go, of course. I've known Naruto was a lot smarter and presumed stronger and faster than what the academy stated, and well, yeah, I've watched him somewhat train, and yeah, a few times, not many, but I know more than enough that the sheer amount of weight he wears when training would put him easily at probably low to mid tuning. So what do you place him as, Kakashi? Well, if we're speaking just taijutsu, Hokage-sama, I don't even think he was truly going through fall out as the battle went. But if both Sasuke and Naruto were to truly show their true, if they were truly to go fully out on me, straight from the get-go, that teamwork alone would probably ever lose, both one another to Jonin, mid to high Jonin level. That teamwork is, you can't put a rank on it, Hokage-sama. Which Huzen would none, which pretty much meant that they were they could, instinctual react to whatever one another was doing. They were on the same wavelength at all time when it came to, collaborating with one another, which was a damn dangerous thing for the enemies, and a damn good thing for allies, for so much, them, and yeah. Yeah, so not only go though separately fighting, I'd probably put Sasuke at about probably borderline low Jonin. Though if you disregard chakra, then probably high, probably mid to high tuning Naruto with chakra, high Jonin Hokage-sama to potentially maybe borderline S rank without chakra enhancements, borderline Jonin, borderline low Jonin. Though then again, he was mid somewhat not at that, though he did be shocked. And what do you think of his intelligence? I don't really know Hokage-sama. I haven't really tested them, that I couldn't really test them somewhat that much, as I was, think I was nearly going to use, if the fight had gone on for a minute or two longer, I would have used the Sharingan, as his unpredictability and the speed alone was really making me somewhat consider using the Sharingan to be able to hopefully start dodging more of his attacks. And he was not at that, and Kunai and Asuma would just be shocked, and they would somewhat though Asuma would go, then don't you think it'd be better, promote the to tune into it before Hizen could speak? Kakashi would go, no. They have their skills, yes, and whilst I've probably trained with one another, they haven't been in a life or death situation yet, and whilst being Genin, they still haven't had that skill yet, so they probably haven't, they more or less haven't experienced that feeling yet, so doing so would most definitely get them killed, especially if they somehow wind up, being on a, team with other, tuning that, or, somehow leading or being sent on a mission together. They could very much die, so no. That, and they have some other skills. What about their stealth, their information gathering, all of that? Whilst Naruto is definitely high up there, Anbu definitely. What do you mean Anbu? He's a prankster, Kakashi would state. And if you haven't realised, no Anbu, Jonin, Chunin or Genin have gotten him. But what about his, as Kakashi, Hizen would speak out, I occasionally let Shiruka do so, but nobody's never truly managed to capture Naruto. And only when he wants to be captured will he be captured. Kurenai. So I will go with Kakashi here, and would state that he's probably S rank, if not double S rank, when it comes to his staff abilities. Information gathering, A to S potentially, though we'll sort of have to see. And chakra control, well, I do not know, though. So I'd probably soundly put him in about mid to high tuning. Though, but of course, with actual, but though thrown into the real world against actual shinobi and that, and lacking all that experience, it'd be nothing more than they probably getting in all that. So they'd sort of nod. Parents are kind of really hammering home that the natural sort of skill they build up, the experience they build up was indispensable. And with that, guys, I'm going to end this part here. So if you have enjoyed this, do tell me in the comments down below, and of course if you want part 4, guys, do say. And hope you guys have yourself a good day or night, depending on wherever you are and whenever you watch this. And hey, good bye. Bye.